This is Jody Lemieux, your host to the Spiritually Aligned CEO podcast, and you're listening to Conversations with Jody, your one divine guidance system, giving your mindset and business a spiritual facelift by tapping into energy, gaining inspiration, and up-leveling your life by unleashing your infinite potential. And on today's episode, I have with me Bryan Winston from Bryan Winston Coaching. Bryan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. This will be a lot of fun. Very interesting.
Yes, I'm so excited for the listeners to kind of hear the dialogue between you and I. We have known each other just for a couple of months. However, the synergy of our conversations around books and around consciousness is really intriguing. And I'm excited for my audience to get to know this side of me a little bit better, but also to hear from you as well.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I really enjoyed our conversations. You and I met in a BNI meeting, and then we had a conversation. And then we were part of H7 Network, another networking group. And I've been in rooms with you before, and I love the way that you have an interesting way of showing up. You have an interesting presence to you that stands out in a group. It's very it's joyful. It's very sincere. It's very peaceful. It's very warm. It's an enlightened kind of way of showing up that I really enjoy. So, and I've enjoyed all the conversations we've had, especially the last couple when we started realizing that we love all the same books.
Yes, and some of those favorite titles, Psycho-Cybernetics. The reason why I name my podcast, Giving Your Mindset and a Business a Spiritual Facelift, based off of Psycho-Cybernetics book. Other books like, Feeling is the Secret, Neville Goddard, Think and Grow Rich, but more so specifically that you and I recognized the more recent book that I'm just reading that you've already read, Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender by Dr. David Hawkins.
Yeah, David R. Hawkins is one of my favorite. So right now, the four, I'm kind of actually looking at them now. Letting Go by David R. Hawkins, A Course in Miracles. I have a Neville Goddard reader that has 10 of his books, and then Ernest Holmes' work are my favorites. And Letting Go is just such a powerful, it's a life-changing book. It's one of the few books that I read and I got all the way to the end, and I went right back to the first page and started reading it all over again. Like I didn't even hesitate. So powerful, just the ideas behind it. And I went on to read, I've read a whole bunch of his other books too. After I read that book, I went and read Power versus Force, and I read that series, and I just kept wanting to know more and more and more and be exposed to more of what he offers. But I find that Letting Go is probably the most easily understandable and soluble of his books. And I love to dive in and talk about it. Before we got on, I was like kind of looking through my notes. I was like, I hope I can remember what he even wrote.
Well, you're an executive coach that works with high peak performance executives. And so you really focus in on their mindset. And so you and I recognize that, yes, consuming all this content and reading books is just one piece. It's just opening up our own consciousness to the level that that we and others like us are rising up in our consciousness and really seeing life from a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, when working with, I think it's really important when working with anyone, whether it's a stay-at-home mom or it's a leader of a corporation, to help someone slow down and see more clearly. You not only help that person, but then you help everyone who they come into contact with and they have the pleasure of spending time with. So if you help a stay-at-home mom and you really help her to see really clearly when she speaks to her husband or when she speaks to her children, there's a different way that she's showing up. When she speaks to her friends, there's a different way that she's showing up that affects all of those people. And same thing with a leader of an organization. If I'm able to speak to them and help them to get clear and slow down and see things a lot more clearly and see their truth more clearly, all the people who they are responsible for leading are all affected. So I find this work to be very, really enlightening and really helpful for that.
I love what you're talking about, specifically the slowing down, because part of what of letting go for me was that just really being an observer of my thoughts and feelings rather than, being them, because that's not who we truly are. We're not our thoughts and feelings.
Mhm.
And that's what Dr. Hawkins talks about is really just being an observer, watching these emotions and thoughts come, and then, giving them guidance, guiding them
Mm.
rather than them controlling you.
Yeah, I love the idea of not being your thought, because most people, if you ask them, they probably would think that they are their thoughts and they are their emotions. But when we're given the opportunity to step back from them and to see it as this is something that we are experiencing rather than it being us. I was just before we got on, as I mentioned, I was kind of reading through just to get a refresher on what's written, and this idea that we are the experiencer, that we are unconditioned consciousness experiencing all these things. It's really enlightening and freeing things to kind of mull over and to come to understand.
Yeah.
You
So for me, the slowing down was part of conversations. I
know?
know in my own relationships with my husband and my children, I'm more aware of what I'm saying
Mm,
because there's more of an understanding of what I want in life.
mm. Yeah, and that comes from really being able to. I think that really comes from being able to slow down. As a coach, helping someone to slow down a bit is so helpful, because if you can even think of the analogy of if you're driving around, I live in New York City, you're driving around New York City and you're going 100 miles an hour up and down the road, it's going to be difficult for you to talk about what you really saw, right? You're not going to see the details. But if you slow down to 25 miles an hour and you look out the windows, you can start to really see things a lot more clearly. And when there's all these thoughts and all these questions are plaguing someone, and you slow it down and say, well, what's the most important thing for us to talk about? And let's slow that down. Things start to get so much more clear. And it's such a helpful thing for a coach to be able to do, is to help someone get clear with what's really going on. And we can start to question, Byron Katie's another author that I love, Loving What Is. And she says, either you're believing your thoughts or you're questioning them. There's no those two ways about it. Either you're believing them or you're questioning them. So you either believe in your programs or you're questioning them. So giving someone the opportunity to slow down and look at what's being thought and see if it's really valid or not valid is so helpful for an individual.
And here we go again. Byron Katie. Here's my quote from her.
Mm.
Who would you be without your story?
Who would you be without your story? Yeah, she has a book. I think that's one of her book titles, actually.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Yeah,
Yes.
she's phenomenal. She's
Mhm.
phenomenal. Byron Katie. Those four questions. The work. It's is that true? Can you be certain that's true? What happens when you believe that? And who would you be without that thought? Those four questions. I use those. I plagiarize Byron Katie. 90% of my sessions. Is that true? Just asking someone, really, is that true what you said? And can you be certain that's true? Or it could be that you're believing something that's not true. It's such a liberating thing to be able to do with someone. Again, it's taking a step back from what you're thinking. You are not these thoughts. These are things that you're experiencing. And some of them we hold on to. I was talking to my coach the other day, and I realized I have some thoughts about anger. And I was really holding on tight to him. And he was like, look, you can hold on tight to him if you want to. I mean, but look, you're believing some things about anger. You have these thoughts about anger, and they're having a certain effect on you. And it's up to you now that you know that they're thoughts. Like, do you want to continue holding on to them, or do you want to let go of them? But it all starts with the awareness of this: I am not my thoughts. I am not my emotions. I am the experiencer of these things.
And that comes around full circle to our book, Letting Go. And that's what Dr. Hawkins is really talking about, is that observer. Are you really listening to what you're saying? Because as you said so eloquently, Bryan, it's in our conversations. What are we talking about? What are
Mhm.
we choosing to say? Because that's creating our life. That's creating a belief within us.
Mhm.
It creates this emotion. And as you said, you were holding on to some anger, and it may not have looked like it in a conversation, but it shows up in the way you move your body, in interactions in life, and in business too.
Yeah, and on the conscious level, people may not know, but on a subconscious level, like there's a knowing. Everyone has. There's a knowing when you're around someone, and there's a thing that kind of pushes you away from them, or you're around someone. There's a thing that pulls you towards them. It's funny. You and I spoke yesterday or a couple of days ago, and in that conversation, I really felt pulled toward you. But I've had a couple other conversations in the past couple of days where it was really the opposite. It really felt like I was being pushed away, and I saw how this person or these people were unknowingly pushing lots of things away from them, pushing love away, pushing prosperity away, pushing connection away. And they didn't say it. Bryan, get away from me. And I don't want money, and I don't want clients, and I don't want prosperity. They're not saying these things. But if the spirit underneath is pushing those things away, I mean, people, there's a conscious knowing, and then there's something else that's a deeper knowing that I think we're all in alignment with. We're all really in alignment with whether we know it or not, right? So
Yeah.
I really appreciate time spent or time invested with people that are really becoming more conscious of what's going on underneath and what their real true truth is.
So for the people listening, what would be, something that you gave 4 great questions from Byron, Katie, but for you personally, what have you taken from all this information that you have read, that you have implemented in your life? What is something that somebody who's listening, they're just coming into this awareness? What would you suggest?
Well, yeah, you're not who you think you are. Your personality is created. It's something that you are constantly creating. Some people think that their personalities, that they are who they, a lot of people form their personalities in junior high school, and your body just changes, but you still have the same beliefs in the same way from junior high school, but you can recreate something else. You can create something very new. So you are to some degree the co-creator of who you are, right? So the experiences that you're having in your life are a mirror of how you're showing up. And if you're either liking or not liking the experiences you're having, you could change the way that you're showing up. You could change not who you are really, but you can change your personality to fit the things that you want, right? So that's one thing, is that you're not who you think you are, and that you are self-creating to some degree. And then there's this idea of, there's a thing that is everything. There is, it's hard to deny. People would say there's no such thing as God, there's no such thing, that religion is bullshit. They can go through all these things, right? But it's hard to deny that there is a thing called everything. There is the thing, and it's called everything. And that's what I really gravitate towards most when I think of like a higher power, is that there's this thing called everything that we're all a part of, right? And if you can kind of sink your mind into that you and I are connected because we're all a part of this thing, right? And there must be some connection.
I
Right?
love that, Bryan. That is incredible. For those that are listening, how can they find you and reach out to you?
My website, BryanWinstonCoaching.com, BRYAN Winston, WINSTON coaching.com. On Instagram, it's Bryan Winston, I think. I think on Instagram is Bryan Winston. Yeah, those are the ways that people can come into contact with me the best, if they're interested in anything I'm saying, or a conversation, or if they need some help around some things. I would love to help out if I can.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me today. Is there any last minute advice or word that you want to leave with the audience today?
Um, you can go to people for advice. You can go to people for guidance. You can go to people for lots of things, but if you really sit with it, you really do know. If you really sit in the quiet, and really experience what that's like, and spend time allowing that thing that is everything to communicate with you at will. And it's great to get help. It's great to connect with others, but really connecting to yourself is I think more valuable than anything. And when I say self, I mean self with the uppercase S, like your true self. So any challenge that you're having, any problem that you're having, any question that you're having, if you really sit with yourself for long enough and you're really clear on what those questions are, they'll be answered for you.